Okay, I think it's time to begin. It's good to see you. Good to be back in the saddle again. We're in 1 Kings chapter 21. We're skipping chapter 20 because there's nothing about Elijah or Elisha in there. I was going to cover that, but it covers some unnamed prophets, and our focus is on Elijah and Elisha. So I would encourage you to read 1 Kings 20, but we're going to skip that and go to 21 to Naboth's vineyard, which is probably a well-known episode or story in the Old Testament. We've been looking at Elijah being the prophet of God. Of course, his name means Yahweh is my God. And we have illustrated, I guess, the ups and downs of even prophetic figures like Elijah. And I think it might be an assumption that we make at times that those who are in, prophetic positions of the prophets in the Old Testament, or even ministers or preachers, we can bestow upon them qualities or characteristics that may be too high. And every prophet, every minister, preacher, every Christian has their challenges and setbacks, and it's always surprising, though, to me when you read about Elijah. He conquers the prophets of Baal at Mount Carmel, this fantastic battle and duel, and the next episode is his lowest. So he goes from the highest, that he probably could experience and feel at the time of being God's prophet and combating the pagan religion of Jezebel and all that, and then he's running from Jezebel. And he gets depressed. He begins to question his own ministry. He even accuses God of, not sticking up for him. And after, a period of time and God's patience with him, and even God providing for him, he's revived and is reoriented to do what God wants him to do. So God forgives him. I think that's implied in the text, and gives him a new commission. And do you remember what the commission was? The three things that were given to Elijah to do after he was restored to the ministry following the prophet of Baal's episode. Do you remember the three things? He was commissioned to go and anoint a king, Ben-Hadad. He was also commissioned to do what? Elaine's feverishly looking it up. Let's look here. Okay, chapter 19 of 1 Kings. I got the name wrong of the king. It's Hazael over Syria. That's in 19 verse 15. He is to anoint Jehu. He's going to be king over Israel. And then he is to establish his replacement, who would be who? Elisha. So, he's got things that he's commissioned to do even after the failure at Jezreel in confronting Jezebel and others. I guess it bothers me a little bit Because you would think that if we have experienced or that we have come to know and work through a challenge, that the next one that would arise, we would be what? Weaker or stronger? I would assume that we would be stronger. But the thing is that sometimes the new challenge, the new thing that comes, is not what we anticipated. It gets us off guard. And so our weakness comes back to the top and things seem to repeat again. So there's always a mutiny over the horizon. For the people of God, there's always a mutiny. And, when you look at Paul's travels and establishing congregations, when one thing got settled, over the horizon was something else that was going to happen. So there's never, peace needs to be sought in Christ, not waiting for everything to be just right. Okay, I think what God is teaching us in all these episodes is that the peace that passes all understanding comes from our relationship with God, not dependent upon the circumstances that surround us or what we might encounter. That's what God is leading us to. That's to me is the challenge, because so much of my experience, and I know it's with you too, because I'm one of you, that we turn to the outward circumstances a lot, and that dictates to us, how we feel, our doubts, our faith, and things of that nature. But the peace of God comes in a different way. It's in our relationship with God. That's what gives us strength. It doesn't mean everything that happens to us is going to be a good experience, just as Elijah recognized in, defeating the prophets and then failing in carrying out, or at least confronting Jezebel. Now, there's so much here in 1 Kings about Ahab's reign. Okay, and you asked the question, how come he is the focus of attention? Well, it's a pivotal period in North Israel. Ahab is a roller coaster ride. He does have moments. There are moments in Ahab's reign, in his life, that offer promise, But then what he ends up doing, or what he has done, it just kind of wipes out all of those things. And so what you begin seeing is how deep his corruption is. And I think he's sincere during the times that he repents, because the prophets scare him when they make an announcement about something. And this is going to happen here in Naboth's vineyard when Elijah confronts him. And there'll be a moment. And I think another moment that was a highlight of Ahab's life was when Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal. I think Ahab came to realize his sinfulness, and that was what Elijah was excited about, and was heading to Jezreel for the full emancipation of God's people out of Canaanite religion. But it didn't happen, because Ahab continues to be weak, and although he has moments of repentance and an attitude of wanting to do right, when faced with challenges or even little things, he seems to wane in his faith and goes back doing what he has always done. It reminds me of a New Testament event. You remember the pool of Siloam, when there was a lame man waiting for the stirring of what? Of water, okay? There was a superstition among the people that when the water rippled, it indicated something divine, a divine activity. And the first one who would step in the water, reach it, would be healed of whatever infirmity they had. And so you can imagine where all the people who were sick and lame and had all kinds of issues were hanging out. They were at the pool of Siloam. And so when a rustling of the wind came through the streets and, the little corridors of things, there would be an amplification of excitement, and all of a sudden the water would get, a little ripply because of the air. And there's that story of the lame man who tried to, get to the pool, but everybody stepped over him and pushed him out of the way. It had to be a very, I don't know how you would call it. The word that comes to me is pathetic situation. It was not a pretty sight, and the desperation of all these people. It's just, it's bothersome. It's troublesome. So Jesus, sees this guy, finds out, and he asks him, what do you want? And, what can I do for you? And he begins to say all of the things that have happened to him, and that he can't ever reach the water, if he could just do that. And so Jesus heals him, and he's restored. Jesus is the real one who is the true physician, the medicine man, the healer, okay? Not the pool of Siloam. And so afterwards, however, when he was healed, he took up his pallet, started to walk, and you remember who confronted him? It was the Sabbath day, and who confronted him? The Pharisees did. So what are you doing, carrying your pallet? They started to accuse him of violating the Sabbath, working on the Sabbath. And the first thing that he did was to curl up, figuratively speaking, in his fetal position again. In other words, he wanted to lay down the mat and lay on it, because this is the first time where he had to defend himself. He couldn't rely on his circumstance of being lame and people taking care of him. He had to be accountable himself. Later, Jesus catches him and says for him to stop sinning. I always found that kind of interesting. Stop sinning. He has to own his new life. He's now accountable. He cannot give excuses. He cannot, be anything other than one who is healed. He can't be a victim anymore. That's how he's played his life. He's a victim. And so I think in many ways, this symbolizes Ahab. Ahab is a king. He's very powerful. But his wife seems to be more powerful because she's the one who's actually governing, not Ahab. So we come to verse 1 of chapter 21 of 1 Kings. Now Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel. Jezreel is the second capital city. Samaria is the primary one, but they had a second home, Ahab, Jezebel, and it was in Jezreel. And so it's sort of like their Camp David, if you want to think of it that way. So they had a vineyard in Jezreel, Naboth did, beside the palace of Ahab, king of Samaria. And after this, Ahab said to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard, that I may have it for a vegetable garden, because it is near my house, and I will give you a better vineyard for it, or if it seems good to you, I will give you its value in money." Now, on the surface, this doesn't seem very, and it's not an awful thing, is it? I mean, he's willing to give him something else in its place, and he'll give him full compensation for the property. Sounds like, maybe a good deal if he wanted to take it. But there's also something that's behind this in regard to the property that belongs to the family inheritance, okay? That was guarded under Mosaical law. And we'll find out that Naboth doesn't want to do this. No matter what or how good the offer might be, he's not going to do that because this is his family. It's almost like, in a sense, sometimes of what we have seen in our own country, where you have property that's been owned by a family, a farm for years and years and years. And then, the cities have expanded and there's things that come up and the government has its eye on that property or they want it for something else. And you have these investors and if you're not careful, you don't accept a buyout, they might claim it as eminent domain or, something along that line. And so the things that happen in our world today with government are not any different than what we see happening in Israel. So I want you to keep that in mind as we continue reading. But Naboth said to Ahab the king, "The Lord forbid that I should give you the inheritance of my fathers." And Ahab went into his house vexed and sullen because of what Naboth the Jezreelite had said to him, for he had said, "I will not give you the inheritance of my fathers." And he laid down on his bed, he turned away his face and would not eat any food. So, what are your thoughts about this? What are some ironies or some observations from the text that we just read? What comes to your mind? He don't handle rejection very well, does he? Yeah.
He's not a very strong king.
Yeah, not very strong. I mean, this is almost like childlike, isn't it?
Yes.
At least that's how it's portrayed in the text. He doesn't get what he wants, so what does he do? He pouts. I'm just trying to figure, here you have this king of North Israel, and he's stomping off from Naboth, and he's going back to his capital in Jezreel, and he's shutting the bedroom door, and he gets on his bed, just starts crying and pouting, turning his face away, It's just, I've seen this so much in kids. It's bad when you see it in adults. Why? Why is that bad when you see things like this in an adult? Yeah, you would think that they would have matured by this time, that people grow out of these childish things. Not Ahab. And Ahab is a representative of some people. Bad example for us. And this is one of the reasons, or one of the ways the Bible teaches, is by putting two characters together, Elijah and Ahab. And I think the implication is, which one should we follow? Ahab is not a good example of what it means to be a leader, or what? I mean, what else is he not a good example of? A man. I don't think he's an example of a man. What else? I think Sherry would be disgusted at me if I behaved like this as her husband. Yeah, there would be no respect. There's no respect. And so he's an example of someone, no one respects Ahab. Now, people are afraid of him because he does wield the power of government. He's the king. He can have someone executed. He can do some things, and Jezebel's going to remind him about his power. But it's just a sad portrait of a human being. He, for whatever reason, he wanted that vineyard. He wanted to increase his particular, domain, the things that he had, and he doesn't get what he wants. Sometimes you don't. And there's other things that are the undercurrent. He was taking away the inheritance. He wanted that which belonged to the family, the generations of Naboth. But that didn't stop him, or that didn't, cause him really to relent or say, yeah, I understand, I was in the wrong. He's not a very mature individual. It's very important in the Lord's church, just as a side note, that we appoint mature individuals. I think that's why we have the term elder. Not that they're perfect anyway. There's also a bishop is another word, overseer, a pastor, shepherd. But elder doesn't necessarily mean old age, though we would see it that way. And it's not because I'm over 60 that I'm saying that, okay? Elder basically is describing someone who has the wisdom of experience and knowledge. And at times that could be, someone who's a little younger. But we know what maturity is. That's what the Bible is getting us to. What was the problem of the Christians that the writer of Hebrews was addressing? I know that's... They hadn't grown to maturity. By now, you ought to be what? Teachers, but you have need again for someone to teach you the what? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. That's the sarcasm there in regard to the people, the elementary principles. You should grow beyond that. It's not saying that we shouldn't teach those, but you're at a point in your Christian life that what is challenging you, your Christian faith should be encountering that and enduring that. That's where you should be. And isn't it true that we can be in the church a long time, okay? We've been Christians a long time. And if the people that the writer of Hebrews was addressing could continue to be infants and need milk and not solid food, I suspect that can be true also of the church today. And that's one of the reasons that hinders not only the church's growth and unity, but it's a cause of much chaos and could be division, because maturity of knowledge and Christian social maturity. Paul addresses a lot about us growing in our love for one another and our compassion. But those who are immature don't do that. They still might be reactive to something or caught up in gossip and things that are infantile and not things that illustrate Christian maturity, right? So it is an issue. So here he is. He's on his bed. He's pouting. He's turned away his face, and he will eat no food. I suppose I'm to look at this turning away his face. He's looking at the wall instead of out, in the room. In other words, he didn't want anybody to see him. He's pouting. Every time I read this stuff, I just think, if you've been a parent, you see all kinds of things that remind you of your kids. You discipline their immaturity, or they get upset and they pout about things. But for an adult to do this is shameful. So, verse 5, here comes the contrast. But Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said to him, "Why is your spirit so vexed that you eat no food?" And he said to her, and you might want to read this in a pouting voice, I don't know. He says, "Because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite, and said to him, 'Give me your vineyard for money, or else, if it please you, I will give you another vineyard.' And he answered, 'I will not give you my vineyard.' And Jezebel, his wife, said to him, 'Do you not govern Israel? Arise, eat bread, and let your heart be cheerful. I will give the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. I will give it to you.'" Thoughts? I never liked this phrase, but it is a figure of speech that we've used. Who wears the pants in the family? You know, I've heard that a lot, and it's definitely seen here.
He also didn't tell it like the whole story.
Yeah,
He didn't say that, he said he won't give it to you, but there was a reason why.
yeah, but she wouldn't
He
care.
left that.
Yeah, he left that out, but she wouldn't care anyway.
No, I know.
But so, what does she do? Tell me about her character. What's interesting in the text? When she says, I'll give it to you, what does that imply? I mean, what do you begin to imagine? You know, us as readers, what comes to your mind before we know the full story?
She'll take care of the problem.
We'll take care of the problem.
Whatever she has to do. she'll do.
Whatever she has to do. And how am I to understand that? If it is sinful, will she do it? Yeah. If it's deceitful, if it's under the table, if it's, you know, bribery or whatever. I mean, everything's on the table with Jezebel, unfortunately. You almost see Ahab does restrain himself from doing what Jezebel is now going to do, right? But that's really not a compliment to him, because he's pouting and he wants the vineyard, and so Jezebel is playing on his what? How is Jezebel manipulating Ahab? Which is what she does. Okay. So, yeah, you know, I don't know if Jezebel might have put the hint of the vineyard. You know, it'd be nice to have a larger vineyard and things of that nature. You know, what about Naboth? You know, why did he go down there? It may have been all her plan from the very beginning to get him like this and taking advantage of his mood and his emotion, you know, his state of mind. But she's going to take care of it. He doesn't ask any questions. He doesn't say, what? Okay, I'm going to take care of it. What should I be our question, maybe?
How?
Yeah. How are you going to do it? What are you going to do? No, you're not going to do that. Nothing is stated about that, which seems to me that, you know, Ahab, by his immaturity, has given approval to everything Jezebel is going to contrive to create, to get what he wants.
When I've always read this story, I saw the weakness in Ahab, that even the people did not respect him, did not,
Yeah.
you know, if she had gone to him and asked for the vineyard, he'd have probably given it to her. Because she was feared. Ahab what? You know, the people did not follow
Yeah.
him. They followed her.
Yeah.
It was always, through this whole storyline, it was always her,
Yeah,
not him.
exactly. You're right. Because there's no fear of, you know, Ahab per se. Even Naboth in his response to a king, you know, wasn't whatever your king desires, you know. There wasn't any fear. But Ahab had his brutality. He was known for that. But the one who was behind everything, and everybody knew it, was Jezebel. So she instigates a plan. So let's read it here. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal. And she sent the letters to the elders and the leaders who lived with Naboth in his city. And she wrote the letters, proclaim a feast, and set Naboth at the head of the table. And he set 2 worthless men opposite him, and let them bring a charge against him, saying, you have cursed God and the king. Then take him out and stone him to death. That's the letter that's gone out. To who? The letter was sent to who?
Elders
the neighbors of Naboth, the elders around him, which says something about them. It reminds me of something that David once did. You remember when he committed adultery with Bathsheba and he wanted to cover it up. And so what happened to Bathsheba's husband? Okay, he was killed in battle, but tell me how he was killed. What was the plan that David had concocted?
David says the letter, have him go back when they attack.
That's right. He gave a letter to his general, to the messenger to give to the general, Joab, and put him in the front as they are in battle. And then right when they get to the, the battle, all this, come back and have him out there, man. And he's the one that gets it all. And he is the person who shows the most godliness in the narrative. Because David got him from the battle and wanted him to go home to Bathsheba, have relations with her, so, it would be, his child, not David's. But he wouldn't go because of his commitment to his army. He would not. He said, God forbid that I go and enjoy my wife while my men and my fellow soldiers are in battle. So he slept outside. And David got really irritated. He got so irritated that he made him drunk. So he would wonder, but even in his own drunken state, he did not go home. He stayed and slept outside. And David said, that does it, and wrote his execution in a letter to give to the general. So David's rebuked by that. The thing that he did was a sin before God, and Nathan the prophet comes and rebukes him and says that the child is going to die, and that he's going to have issues in his family for the rest of their life. And he does, man. David's family life is just terrible, atrocious. So here's Jezebel doing the same kind of thing, before David. And we see in these particular, or after David, we see in this particular event that everything is planned. And so this is Jezebel's idea. And Naboth, tell me something about Naboth, how he's presented in the text. I mean, we don't know a whole lot about him, but from what we do read in the text, how would you describe him?
I think he sounds like he was an honest man, and that he probably was not a worshiper of false gods, but of God.
Yeah, he may be one of those that were the few who maintained faith in God. He was concerned about his family's inheritance. That's Mosaical law. And he's strong enough, manly enough to stand before the king and oppose the king's overstep. Okay? So, even the little things that we see about Naboth are in contrast, to Ahab and Jezebel. But the innocent one gets what? Just like Uriah, what happens to him? We know the story. He's killed, he's murdered. It's not fair, is it? Well, see, that's the life in a world with evil. You can't expect that everything that happens to you will be fair, but we'll always complain that it's not, right? We'll always think that we've been slighted or something's unfair. Why? Well, this is a good example of why innocent people suffer. One of the main reasons is because of what other people do, what they contrive. what they create in their own minds, the evil that they concoct. And here's an example. I don't know if y'all watching the news, how much I feel better when I don't watch it in regard to our political stuff that's happening, but it's really intriguing stuff coming out. There's a lot of evil that's covered up. Would you agree with that? A lot of stuff that we don't know about that's done and contrived and strategized for the purpose of not us, not citizens, but for other things, either money or power or things of that nature. It just doesn't change. And sometimes we're in the crosshair. Your opposition, your faith, your refusal to bow the knee to Baal can be that very thing that gets you in a lot of trouble. Like an elderly woman who's praying at an abortion clinic gets arrested, put in jail. You know, it's just a lot of things are just kind of upside down. I think this story is illustrating this. I mean, it's nothing new under the sun, as the book of Ecclesiastes would say, right? So, she wrote the letters. She took it upon herself, her authority. We don't see that she told Ahab what she's going to do. She just said, I'm going to get it for you. Don't be upset. So, this feast is called together. Verse 11, and the men of the city, the elders and the leaders who lived in the city, did as Jezebel had sent word to them, as it was written in the letters that she had sent to them. They proclaimed a feast and set Naboth at the head of the people, and the two worthless men came in and sat opposite him. And you might have sons of Belial in your translation. Do you have that? The ones who are saying wrong things. Well, all that means is worthlessness. The sons of worthlessness. And these worthless men brought a charge against Naboth in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth cursed God and the king. So they took him outside the city and stoned him to death with stones. And they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth has been stoned, he is dead. Just like the message David received about Uriah.
But why did they send it to her and not Ahab? Because she wrote it in his name with his seal.
Okay. Why didn't I didn't get the first part.
Why did they send word to her and not Ahab?
Kind of shows you who they know, who's behind it, don't you? She has her claws in a lot of things. I imagine her influence. And as Paul stated, the people seem to fear Jezebel. So if one violated maybe an announcement or pronouncement of Ahab, they would endure or suffer the wrath of Ahab? No, Jezebel. So it is an interesting observation. What's even more concerning to me is the fact that his neighbors and the people that knew him, and I think the implication is they knew him and they knew that this wasn't true. And yet, because of the edict or even their fear, they compromised themselves to find someone to accuse. Do you see any parallels to Jesus? The accusations brought against him? Found some worthless fellows, some people who would go along for their own, benefit and what would happen to them, and accuse Jesus of certain things. It's a tragedy that we have those kind of people, don't we?
From the beginning.
From the beginning. So in Washington, back to politics a little bit. The Bible's filled with politics, In Washington, the richest city in the world, I presume, trillions of dollars, trillions upon trillion. And you have all these special interests who live in Washington. What do the special interest people do?
Special interest people lobby.
They lobby to get who to do what?
They get legislators, Congress.
Yeah, to get legislators, those who can, you know, to pass laws or oppose laws that impact who? Their special interests. So you have, you know, the drug empires, you know, all kinds of things. You can imagine. I was thinking the other day what it would be like to be a politician in D.C. and probably be in your office and every day, probably every 2 minutes, there's someone of special interest want to come in. And then under the table, what do they promise or kind of give the politician? Probably no record about it, but isn't it amazing how rich our politicians get after they serve in government and they walk out? They come in as paupers and they leave as kings and queens, man. Right?
And if they do the right thing, they're gonna get nice positions
Yeah.
whenever they leave.
Yeah. So it's just a scam, you know. I was reading the other day of how even if one has all good intentions, the temptation and the pressure when you get there, it's just overwhelming and turns good people bad, corrupts them. And I'm not saying everybody, but that to me is a representation, present day, of what's happening here. You've got Jezebel that's getting people to come and falsely accuse somebody of something they didn't do in order for the king to get a vineyard. Now think about this. A vineyard for a life. Does that make sense to you? Is that the worth of Naboth? And so, go ahead. What?
So that's how they see it.
That's how they see it. And
They
so,
like they're gonna like this, it's all there is. They're not thinking about it.
no, and that's what the world does. It causes you to devalue what is valuable and to elevate that which is not valuable. And so we have the demise of Naboth. And so I'm going to stop there. We'll continue, but you know, God's not going to leave it alone, because guess who's coming? As soon as Ahab goes to, with great delight, to take the vineyard, he's going to meet unexpectedly his enemy, Elijah. All right, that's it. Thank you.